My father landed at D-Day. There were 6,000 American casualties there. But the 3-day Battle of Gettysburg cost 50,000 American casualties. No one had had any sense of just how bloody a war this was going to be.
What happens when you can't dream? We've seen it many times. During the American Civil War, there was little dreaming. Just nightmares. So very many nightmares.
You know, what goes through a man's mind in that situation? Keep going forward? Do you know it's suicide? Do you think you have a chance?
Something that we don't understand today is that they constructed courage differently. It's a very different expectation. They enlisted from a hometown in their hometown unit, so they couldn't run away because they could never go home.
Casualties were a given. The generals were matter-of-fact about it. You were going to lose 15% or 18% of your men. It's staggering.
Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, U.S. Grant, William Sherman, all the generals of the North and South, whatever else they accomplished during the war, whatever other plans they made, battles they fought, or bravery they personified, they missed an important opportunity to dream.
The drill manuals of the time that were used by most of the generals were manuals based on field tactics that went back to the Napoleonic era. The idea was to mass as many men together as possible to create what effectively is a giant shotgun blast.
You wanted that first volley to be a devastating, effective volley. So the men really have it drilled into them that they will march straight forward, standing up, shoulder to shoulder, in 2 ranks.
For thousands of years, men fought in standing ranks, tightly pressed shoulder to shoulder, courage taken from comrades to the right and left, fellow soldiers moving as one brunt, an instrument of glory. Well, that's how it used to work.
The idea of fighting in ranks like that certainly goes back to the Greeks and to the Romans. It is not only a fighting technique, it's command and control. As you're marching forward, you're feeling that touch on both sides. There's a solidity, it's reassuring.
The Greeks, the hoplite armies, came to battle upright, marching, not charging, as one unbeatable surge. A close quarters crushing phalanx of sword, spear, muscle, and weight against lighter armed, less disciplined armies. A corps against soon-to-be corpses.
The Romans had better discipline because they had professionals. Still, it's a forest of spears. You can't charge into that.
The Greek and Roman objective was not invulnerability, not invincibility, but relentlessness. Close with them in your ground of fertilizer, or you'll break ranks in fear and exhibited a coward. But when swords become artillery, blind courage can take you across a battlefield only so far. The brave fell like rain.
There is so much noise, so much smoke once you have gunpowder. In a battlefield, it's just chaos.
You keep feeding men into this conflagration, and then you just have mass confusion. So commanders would constantly be yelling, close the ranks, fill in the gaps.
And do your duty.
The effective range of weaponry during the Civil War for muskets and rifled muskets was about 100 to 200 yards. Now, in the hands of an expert, a really good shot, a soldier could get his weapon accurate nearly at 1,000 yards. The real scary part of the bullets, which were either round balls or what was called mini balls, was if it crashed into your bones, in any of your appendages. A ball like that would probably take out 2 to 3 inches of your arm bone.
Add cannon fire to the assault's beginning and a ruthless bayonet charge at the end, and you have a massive meat grinder.
You can imagine the shock because of the lines being so close together. Dozens and dozens of men at one time being devastated by canister fire. Sometimes you have a general like General Lee at the third day at Gettysburg that says, send them all in at Pickett's charge, with devastating results.
And they went. They knew what was coming, and they went.
A lot of good men were killed and massacred for really no reason. There was no real strategic or tactical victory in a lot of those battles. The standard weapon of the Civil War used by the infantry was a single-shot rifled musket. And there were two main types. One was Springfield, the other was Enfield. These weapons were actually at the end of their technological life. That, of course, was because of the slow rates of fire.
To reload a musket, you needed to stand, and that made you vulnerable. You were a target.
The phalanx of the Greeks was now rendered into battle lines of the Union and Confederate armies. But there was another way.
With the advent of the repeating rifle, you could shoot and load from behind cover.
The Civil War was the first war in which modern weaponry came into existence and some extended use, but not a lot. Reason being, those weapons tended to be somewhat more expensive. And the Army didn't want to have to pay any more money for weapons if they didn't have to.
Other technologies went unexplored too.
Let's say that the Union or the Confederacy could have used tanks on the battlefield. Now, of course, it's impossible, you say.
The first mechanically powered vehicle in the world was not a railroad locomotive or a passenger car or a steamboat, but a precursor of the modern tank.
There was an obscure French inventor that developed a steam-powered artillery carriage in 1769 and drove this thing around the streets of Paris.
The inventor was Nicolas Cousineau. The French army wasn't buying, neither was America.
Now, what if, with some research and development, Cousineau's steam carriage became a war wagon, a forerunner of the tank? Do you see the potential there? Just think, had they had a tank during the Civil War, the outcome would have been decisive. They could have protected those soldiers and minimized those losses.
Generalship of the day didn't promote innovation in battlefield tactics, no dreaming aloud. So, no matter our other considerations of Lee and Grant as fine leaders, they squandered men.
We lost more people at Shiloh than the entire American Revolution. One day, one battle. And you know what? There were 20, 30 more battles like that to come in the war. Shiloh, 23,000 casualties. Second Manassas, 26,000 casualties. Chancellorsville, 29,000 casualties. Chickamauga, 35,000 casualties.
Civil War dead totaled 650,000, though the true number's unknown. 650,000 corpses remade the minds of every general, every politician, every family, every human. We were developing from the toughest and hardiest to the best and brightest. But for the time being, we were just the most grievously wounded. The feudal system of butchery that marched through the classics, the Middle Ages, and the Napoleonic Wars was finally condemned and broken. The soldierly system that drained into the American Civil War with men dressed in smart shoulder-to-shoulder ranks was buried along with the dead. Although it would take many years to be fully realized, we would demand that our treasure and intellect be spent in place of our blood. Wars yet to be fought would be done so, with casualties considered and lives accounted for.
After the 3-day Battle of Gettysburg, they found a young man who served in Pickett's charge, and they asked him, "How did you survive when so many didn't come back?" Here's the story he told. He had enlisted when he was 16. He was the youngest man in the company. He served at 2nd Manassas, and then he was at Gettysburg. They marched out of the woods, and they're in the 3rd wave, so immediately they're climbing over bodies of men already killed by the shell fire. He gets closer and closer and closer. It's a long way across that field. He can see the Federal troops. Now they're into bodies left from the days fighting before. And he realized, with men falling all around him, I'm never going to see my ma again. And he looked at the captain, and the captain looked at the youngest man in the company, and he nodded and tacitly gave permission for them to get out of there. 5 men made it back to North Carolina from that campaign, out of that town, 5 men, and he was one of them.
Finally, we turned our back on slavery, indentured servitude, even the old European guild system, gone as certainly as the bankrupt Civil War tactic of files of dead men marching. Now the individual would ascend. Families broken through immigration to the States split anew to make their way west. The veterans, the freed slaves, and the immigrants trudged the hard road home. After fighting our countrymen, our next struggle would be against nature, on some of the most desiccated and harshest terrain on the planet. And we thought it a new opportunity. The homestead. Next time on The American Dream.